What if one man didn't just become rich, but quietly controlled an entire industry? And what if the system he built still shapes the world you live in today? In this video, we're breaking down how John D. Rockefeller built one of the largest fortunes in history. You'll understand his strategies, his mindset, and the systems he created. By the end, you'll see how his decisions still influence business, money, and power today. Let's start with a simple idea. Most people think getting rich means working hard, saving money, and maybe getting lucky. Rockefeller thought differently. From a very young age, he focused on one principle: make money work for you. When he was just 12 years old, he lent money to a farmer and earned interest. That small moment may not sound big, but it changed how he saw the world. Money wasn't just something to spend, it was something to grow. And that idea stayed with him for life. Now, fast forward to the mid-1800s. America was changing fast. Railroads were expanding, cities were growing, new industries were being built almost overnight. It felt like opportunity was everywhere. But it also felt chaotic. There were very few rules, and people were experimenting, failing, and trying again. And then came oil. At first, the oil business looked like a gold rush. People rushed to drill wells, hoping to strike it rich overnight. Some did. Many didn't. It was unpredictable. One day you could become wealthy, and the next day your well could run dry. Prices kept changing, supply was unstable. It was a risky game. But Rockefeller didn't get caught up in that excitement. He stepped back and looked at the bigger picture. Instead of asking, "How do I find oil?" he asked a different question. Where is the real control in this industry? That question changed everything. He noticed something simple but powerful. Drilling for oil was uncertain. It depended on luck, timing, and nature. Sometimes you find oil, sometimes you don't. It was like gambling. But refining oil, that was different. Once oil was extracted, it couldn't be used directly. It had to be refined into useful products like kerosene. And that process was consistent. It didn't depend on luck in the same way drilling did. More importantly, no matter who found oil, they all needed refiners. That meant refining sat right in the middle of the entire system. Rockefeller realized this was the key point of control. If you controlled refining, you didn't need to worry about who discovered oil. You didn't need to take the biggest risks. Instead, you could position yourself where everyone had to come to you. So instead of chasing oil fields, he focused on building refineries. This decision may look simple now, but at the time, it was a very different way of thinking. While others were chasing quick wins, Rockefeller was building a system. He wasn't trying to win one race. He was trying to control the track, and that became his first major move, one that quietly set the foundation for everything that followed. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Rockefeller wasn't just focused on making money. A lot of people in that time were chasing profit, but they often ignored how efficiently they were operating. Rockefeller saw things differently. For him, profit was not just about earning more. It was about wasting less. He believed a simple idea. If you remove waste, profit can increase naturally. This mindset shaped almost every decision he made. There's a famous example that shows exactly how he thought. In his refineries, kerosene was packed into metal cans. To seal these cans, workers used small drops of solder. At first, each can used about 40 drops. Now, most people would not question that. It worked, so why change it? But Rockefeller paid attention. He studied the process carefully and asked a simple question. Can this be done better? After testing and refining the method, he found a way to reduce the number of drops from 40 to 39, just one drop less. At first, it sounds almost unimportant. One drop doesn't feel like a big deal. It's easy to ignore something that's small. But Rockefeller didn't think that way. He looked at scale. His factories were producing millions of cans. When you multiply one small saving across millions of units, the result becomes significant. That single drop saved a large amount of material over time, which meant lower costs and higher profits. And this wasn't just about saving money, it showed how his mind worked. He paid attention to details that others often missed. He believed that small improvements, repeated again and again, could lead to big results. He didn't rely only on big, bold moves. He combined them with small, consistent improvements. This approach gave him an advantage. While competitors focused only on expansion, Rockefeller was quietly improving every part of his operation. He was making things smoother, faster, and more cost-effective. Over time, these small gains added up. They made his business stronger, more stable, and more competitive. So, this example isn't really about a single drop of solder. It's about a way of thinking. Rockefeller didn't ignore small details. He used them. And that mindset became one of the key reasons his business kept growing while others struggled to keep up. As his refining business grew, Rockefeller didn't slow down. He started thinking about the next step. At first, he had built a strong position in refining, but there were still many other refineries competing with him. Prices could change, competition could increase, and that meant uncertainty. Rockefeller didn't like uncertainty, so he made a move that changed everything. He started buying other refineries. Instead of fighting his competitors in the market, he approached them directly. Sometimes he offered to buy their business. Sometimes he formed partnerships. And sometimes the pressure of competing with his efficiency made selling feel like the easier option. This strategy is called horizontal integration. It simply means expanding by taking over companies that do the same thing as you. Step by step, refinery by refinery, his control grew. As more businesses joined him, competition became smaller. One by one, many of his rivals disappeared. Not always because they failed, but because they became part of his system. But Rockefeller didn't stop there. He realized something important. Even if you control refining, you still depend on other parts of the process. You depend on oil suppliers. You depend on transportation. You depend on materials like barrels. And if those parts are unstable, your business can still be affected. So he decided to go further. He began expanding beyond refining. He invested in oil fields. He gained control over pipelines. He managed the production of barrels. He became involved in transportation and delivery. This strategy is called vertical integration. It means controlling multiple stages of the supply chain, from raw material to final product. Now, instead of relying on outside companies, Rockefeller built a connected system where everything worked together. This gave him more stability. It also gave him more control over costs, timing, and quality. If one part of the system had a problem, he could adjust it internally instead of depending on someone else. At this point, something had changed. He was no longer just running a business inside the oil industry. He was shaping how the industry itself worked. Because when you control multiple layers of a system, your decisions don't just affect your company. They can influence prices, supply, and the direction of the entire market. So, Rockefeller wasn't just participating in the system anymore. Step by step, he had built a structure where he could guide it. And that shift, from being a player to controlling the system, became one of the most powerful parts of his strategy. Let's pause for a second. Think about this more deeply. If you control only one part of a process, you are still dependent on others. You might be successful, but you are also exposed. Prices can change, supply can be interrupted, competitors can influence your position. But if you control every step of that process, something very different happens. You are no longer just participating in a system, you are shaping it. That is the idea at the center of Rockefeller's strategy. When Rockefeller expanded from refining into transportation, oil fields, pipelines, and storage, he wasn't just adding businesses for growth. He was connecting different parts of the same chain into one coordinated structure. And when those parts are connected, decisions in one area affect everything else. For example, if refining costs go down, transportation becomes more efficient. If supply increases in one area, pricing can be adjusted in another. everything starts working like one system instead of separate businesses competing with each other. This is where the scale of his approach becomes clear. He didn't just think in terms of products or companies. He thought in terms of systems. And when you start thinking in systems, your role changes. You are no longer reacting to the market in a small way. You are influencing how the market behaves. That's why Rockefeller's structure became so powerful. It created stability for his business because fewer parts depended on outside forces. It also created efficiency because coordination became easier when everything was connected. But it also raised bigger questions. Because when one organization becomes deeply connected across multiple stages of an industry, its influence naturally grows. Prices, competition, and access can all be affected by decisions made in one place. That is why Rockefeller's system was both admired and criticized. Some people saw it as smart organization and long-term planning. Others saw it as too much control concentrated in one place. But regardless of the opinion, one thing is clear. He changed how business systems were designed. Before him, industries were often fragmented. After him, the idea of integration, both horizontal and vertical, became a major business strategy. So when we step back and look at it simply, the lesson is this. Control in business is not just about owning companies. It is about understanding how each part of a system connects. And Rockefeller understood those connections better than most people of his time. That is what made his approach so powerful and so influential in shaping modern industry. But this kind of control didn't come without controversy. To grow faster, Rockefeller made deals with railroads. He negotiated lower shipping costs for himself. These were called rebates. That already gave him an advantage. But there was something even more powerful. It was called a drawback. This meant that when his competitors shipped oil, part of the money they paid would go back to Rockefeller. Yes, you heard that right. His rivals were indirectly paying him. This made it extremely hard for anyone to compete. Around 1872, news of these deals spread. The oil industry reacted with fear, but Rockefeller saw opportunity. During this period, often called the Cleveland Massacre, he moved quickly. He approached his competitors with a simple choice. Sell your business or risk losing everything. Many chose to sell. Within a short time, he gained massive control. By 1882, his company, Standard Oil, controlled about 90% of oil refining in the United States. That's not just success, that's dominance. Now imagine this. A single company controlling most of a product that powers homes, businesses, and industries. People started to worry. And when people worry, pressure builds. This led to public backlash. Journalists began investigating. One of the most important voices was Ida Tarbell. She exposed many of Rockefeller's business practices. Her work helped people understand how much control Standard Oil had. At the same time, the government stepped in. New laws were created to limit monopolies. One of the most important was the Sherman Antitrust Act. The goal was simple: prevent companies from becoming too powerful in unfair ways. Rockefeller didn't just sit back. When his trust structure was challenged, he adapted. He created a holding company. It was a different legal structure, but it allowed him to maintain control. This shows something important. He didn't just understand business, he understood systems. And when the system changed, he adjusted. But eventually the pressure became too strong. In 1911, the US Supreme Court made a decision. Standard Oil had to be broken up. The company was divided into 34 smaller companies. At first, this might sound like a loss, but here's the twist. Rockefeller owned shares in all of them. As these companies grew, his wealth grew too. So instead of one company, he now had stakes in many, and many of those companies became major global names. This outcome shows something interesting. Sometimes, even when a system limits power, the structure you built can still benefit you. Let's pause again. What do you think? Was this strategy smart or unfair? Let me know in your mind as you keep watching. Now let's talk about the final chapter of his life. After building his fortune, Rockefeller shifted focus. He turned to philanthropy, but he approached it the same way he approached business, with structure, with systems, with efficiency. He didn't just donate money randomly. He built organizations. He funded education, including the creation of the University of Chicago. He established the Rockefeller Foundation. These institutions focused on real problems: disease, public health, scientific research. Instead of short-term help, he focused on long-term impact. For example, efforts were made to fight diseases like yellow fever and hookworm. These programs used research and data. The goal was not just to help people today, but to create lasting change. This approach changed how philanthropy works. It showed that giving money can be organized and strategic, not just emotional. So now we come back to the big question. What is Rockefeller's real legacy? Is it the wealth, or is it the systems he built? On one side, you have a businessman who created efficiency and scale. He made products more affordable. He brought order to a chaotic industry. On the other side, you have someone who used aggressive tactics. He removed competition. He gained control in ways that many people questioned. And maybe the truth sits somewhere in between. He may have been both, a builder and a controller, an innovator and a strategist. But one thing is clear. The structures he created didn't disappear. They evolved. The companies that came from Standard Oil still exist in different forms. The foundations he built still support research and public health. So even today, his influence can still be seen in business, in law, in philanthropy. And maybe that's the most important lesson. Sometimes the biggest impact isn't just what you build, it's the system you leave behind. If you've made it this far, you're already thinking deeper than most. Quick question. Do you think success like this is possible today? And if you had that level of control, would you use it the same way? Remember, real wealth does not need attention. It grows slowly, silently, and often unnoticed. The question is, are you building appearances or are you building freedom? Subscribe for more insights into money, investing, and financial psychology. Until next time.